you had a big week. It's not every week. I know you've had them before, but it's not every week where you write the story that's on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and especially being a champion for tennis and getting it on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Tell us about the article about Novak, the general gist of it, and what were your takeaways?
It's about time Novak Djokovic, one of the towering athletes of our generation, got his own Sports Illustrated cover. So that was sort of selfish motivation. Some of this was spillover from the 60 Minutes piece we did a few months ago, and he was he's just so cool and so generous. And one thing that really struck, this is a really complicated cat, and I had so much material. It was sort of like, why not turn this into a Sports Illustrated story? So one thing is just to the average sports fan, right? You know this guy better than anyone. Our listeners probably have a great deal of knowledge and opinion. To the average sports fan, you pick up your magazine, you sort of vaguely know the name. Even said some people, hey, isn't he the Denver Nuggets center? There are still people that don't understand what makes this guy so extraordinary. So some of it was about demystifying Novak, explaining that some of the same traits that make him extraordinary sometimes work to his detriment, but overall, the track record speaks to itself. And then this GOAT debate, like you say, GOAT debate, and a lot of people roll their eyes. It's been going on 10 years. It's simplistic. It's kind of silly, but it's a thing. I get it. It's sports. It's competitive. There's a scoreboard. We want competition. Seems reasonable to have this conversation. And I always thought it was strange. For 10 years, we were obsessed with this. And Roger pulls ahead, and no, it's Rafa, and head-to-heads, and what should we weigh? And Novak basically in 2023 buries the conversation, right? I mean, you are a hardcore truther if you look at the math and conclude it's anyone other than Djokovic. And then it was sort of like, okay, well, is Sinner going to win more than Alcaraz? But I feel like we had this 10-year obsession, and then it just sort of died. So part of it was also to say, okay, can we at least give the guy a little credit and say he won this discussion that was going on for a decade? He's got the most majors. He's got the most Master Series titles, superior head-to-head. Like, can we at least acknowledge? We don't have to dwell on it, but at least we acknowledge he doesn't get a trophy, doesn't get a check. He is the GOAT. Next topic. So that was sort of the other motivation.
Yeah, it's weird. I've always said, like, I feel like he's the guy that broke up the Beatles, right? Like he's like tennis Yoko. Like he's the one who we didn't need. We had the rivalry. We had the lefty-righty. We had the contrasting styles. We had this. And then all of a sudden, this cyborg robot, but also someone who plays with a lot of emotion, comes in and is like, I'm not buying into the hype. Like, I am complete. You can't go through me. You can't go around me. I'm going to take the punches from these guys. And it was weird. Like, it was almost like the kind of the mainstream, not tennis centric fan was kind of mad at him for it, right? I mean, do you feel that way?
Yeah, my friend Josh Fleming has a great one too. He said it's like he's the stepdad. Like, I'm not going with you, Mom. I'm not going.
That's funny.
Everyone's sort of had mom and dad, and here comes this third party to interrupt the dynamic. I also think, look, I mean, candidly, do I wish he had gotten vaccinated back in the height of COVID? Do I wish he hadn't had that Adria tour? I do. But can we keep things in perspective? Like, add up the pile of virtues and positive things this guy has achieved and add up the unforced error count, and it's still pretty low. And I also think that to the casual fan, they know him as the Anthony. He's the Aaron Rodgers of tennis. And you want to say, first of all, Aaron Rodgers is an asshole. This guy is not. But also, there's complexity here. And if you love the fact that he does things differently, if you love the fact that he's 36 years old and inviting you to Serbia for 2 hours without a minder to have an open conversation, you have to appreciate that there are other things he's going to do that are off script that might not be as advisable. So he's a complicated guy. He's extraordinarily bright. He never escaped me. He was doing this language in like his, sixth language. He was doing the interview in like a sixth language, and I was in my first. I just think, take a step back. Has he done everything perfectly? He has not. At the same time, this is one of the great sports figures of our generation, and it's about time people knew him for that and not for his decisions during COVID.
Yeah, it's also I think what's making this GOAT thing so weird is that we never really get anything that's like final, right? Like the Jordan LeBron debate is like, look, LeBron has left, but he played this. And there are other factors involved where it's like this conversation is largely like math doesn't care about your feelings, and math doesn't care about your vaccination status, and math doesn't care about, like, very simply, and I saw Prime Federer. It was the hardest matchup that I had ever seen, right? He was the best player that stacked up against my game type. So therefore, he's the last person I would want to play, right? For like my life on the line, he's the last guy I'd want to play. But like you line up 3 resumes, and if you choose any of them except for this one, you are an insane human. Like that's just, it's just very simply, that's the way it is. Everything else is about preference of what you like to watch, right? You like the ballet, the artistry, or the blunt force trauma of Rafa. And I've always said what Novak does so well doesn't immediately jump off the screen to an untrained tennis eye. What Roger does very well is very obvious. It's amazing if you know tennis as well as I do, and it's amazing if it's the first tennis match you've ever watched. Rafa, the physicality with which he can play, the RPMs, his speed, the drama of when he's running something out, even the drama of his grunts, like it all makes sense where he's like, okay, this guy's like instantly, he's like this gladiatorial figure. Whereas Novak is like, he is a surgeon. He is literally picking you apart, and you have to make these huge risk trade-offs to make an impact on him. And he knows it, and it might work for a little while, but he knows it and you know it, that you're probably not going to be able to do it over the course of 3 or 4 hours. Now, believe it or not, John, most of us, large-scale debates, aren't great at nuance. We like the simple headline. And Novak's game, frankly, doesn't provide that simple headline often enough. But if you can make an argument against his numbers, you are being willfully ignorant at this point. That's what I think. Why am I wrong?
You are not wrong. I think you're totally right. I think they're two. One of them is, I always think nation of origin has something to do with that too, right? The same way Federer's skills jump out at you, right? You can be a casual fan. You can appreciate this guy's moving really gracefully. He doesn't make any noise. Nadal, this guy's doing weird things with the tennis ball, and he's a lefty, and he's got pirate pants. And Novak doesn't have that immediate jump off the screen appeal. I think some of it too is, I know Switzerland. That's where we used to go on vacation. We go skiing. They're neutral. They like chocolate and secretive banking. I know Spain. We love paella, and we once went to Mallorca. And you say Serbia, and people say, well, wait a second, wasn't this part of Yugoslavia, but it was this breakup, but it was only a few years ago. And we always hear about the swimming pool and the UN and the bombings. Nobody really knows. The casual fan don't necessarily know the history. So I think Djokovic has suffered for that. But I just think, like, enough, guys. He's almost 37 years old, and he's won more majors than any other male who's played tennis. Let's take a moment to appreciate, you're right, even if it takes some complexity, even if it does take a bit of an explanation to explain to the guy next to you on the airplane why he's extraordinary, give the guy his due.
Yeah, and I'll go into it just from like a nerd out situation, and then we'll move on. I've mentioned that it's not easy to explain, but I'll try my best. Simply, his ball never gets up on the backhand side. It is below your strike zone all the time. Like, it's not as if he shanks one up and like he keeps it, drives it through the court, doesn't hit it harder than anyone else. His ball flight keeps it down. His superpower of all superpowers is the ability to switch directions without risk, which means he can find the pattern and the matchup inside of the game that whenever he wants, right? He's the only person that can simultaneously switch directions on Roger, take Rafa's forehand, that lefty thing that jumps up and away, which was Roger's kryptonite, right? Up in this pocket above your head on the backhand side, step in, not only step in and be comfortable driving it, stepping in, comfortable driving it down the line and actually finding Rafa's backhand off of that ball. That is an impossible thing to do. You will not notice it as a tennis fan unless you are an absolute nerd, and he does it over and over again. And he's created this length, right? He has kind of the skill set of Andre where he can stay inside the court and kind of deliver balls to the corners, except he's 5 inches longer and his reach is, 2 feet longer, and he's faster, but he's 6'4".
Wait, keep nerding. Give me 30 seconds more of nerd out, because I love this stuff, and I think our listeners will too. You mentioned the word risk multiple times. I love that. What does it do for you on the other side of the net when you have to change your exposure, when you have to change your risk-reward calculus?
Well, it's positioning. Okay, so let's say he's playing someone like a Jim Courier, who different generations, but literally is itching to the left all the time to try to get hold of the rally with the forehand side and start distributing. Jim, if he knows that he can pump one forehand inside out, and Novak can just as easily, like with a rally pace, right? Most times when we decide to go line as tennis players, it's generally an aggressive shot. We're going there with intent. We've upped the risk. We're going bigger. We're not just rallying. He has mastered how to rally up the line, de-risk it. So therefore, he brings Jim. Jim all of a sudden can't take 2 steps to the left to start dominating. He has to respect that ball up the line. And so therefore, Jim's entire game has changed. And now there's an open avenue to Jim's backhand, which backhand to backhand is a bad matchup for Jim. He wouldn't tell you anything differently than what I'm saying. But when you have to respect both sides, if I know someone's backhand is weak and I know someone can't hit a backhand up the line, all of a sudden my court positioning shifts. I can hit forehands from that inside out corner all day. Maybe they take one up the line, but you're willing to give them that option because it's the least comfortable option that they can get, right? Novak is unbelievable at running second serves in on the body, hitting that little bunny kick out. If against me, I can't create speed on my backhand side. So he hits the little bunny kick. I'm trying to do immediately from the word go because I know that he can distribute the ball. Let's say he hits a little bunny kick up on the ad side. I'm 3 feet outside the court, knowing that I have to create speed from the side that I don't like creating speed on, all the while knowing I have to haul ass to the other side of the court. And all this is happening, and I have half a second to make a decision. So he constantly puts you into that frame of mind of, I have to respect the bleed out, right, as well as the trauma. Like, right, there's an obvious punch. It's like someone, I was explaining it to producer Mike, but it was in regards to kind of this, but also like Roger played me his entire career knowing that I couldn't knock someone out with both hands, right? I was going to jab from my backhand side and try to poke to set up something with the right hand, right? Novak can knock you out with both hands, right? But he can get kind of straight to it, and all of a sudden you don't know what happened. Now you add in defensive skills, the opportunity he can step in on the forehand side and play it big. He can go into lockdown mode. He can decide early in the first set, I'm going to make this guy work for the next 4 hours because this person doesn't like working. They like to take pot shots. His ability to adjust, I can play 4 feet behind the baseline. I can play on top of the baseline, all the while being the best returner and the lankiest returner we've ever seen, right? He can do the chip back in, or he can kind of be on you. His second serve return that he puts on top of your feet, what are you going to do with that? There's nowhere to go. You can't create speed. You can't create angle. Therefore, you're playing back into the court. And then all of a sudden, if he has a backhand, you're not just protecting backhand. You have to protect both sides all the time. It's a mountain to climb, but on every single shot, knowing that he can pull the ripcord to either side of the court, regardless of height over the net. If he's low, he can hit it both ways. If it's high, he can hit it both ways. He can hit it through the court. He can dial it back. He can play defense. He can play offense. It's tough to solve for.
Should have written that story. That was great. And no notes, no nothing. Yeah. So he's good at tennis, is what you're saying.
I'm saying he's good at tennis, and then you add in all of the psychology and all this stuff that you wrote about in your article, and it's tough. It's a tough matchup. But listen, simply, I'll say it again: 3 resumes in front of you. There is one that is the best option. You take feelings out of it. You've never watched any of the players play. You're not emotionally connected to where they're from or what they've done or the fact that they were around when you were 13 and that's how you value nostalgia. Simply 3 resumes in front of you. There's one that you're going to take and say, this is the one that I want, and it's Novak's.
And we are in the world of sports too, right? We can argue about movie stars and rock music and writers, but there's a scoreboard. We keep statistics, so it's rough. People say, "Well, I don't ever care about the number." You're just talking about numbers, and you want to say, "Okay, he won 7 games, and the other guy won 6." Do we flip that around because one guy got to you more aesthetically? Numbers matter.
We don't care about numbers. You have to win 21 sets to win 7 matches over the course of 2 weeks. Stop it! Get the hell out of here.